Good evening once again, and welcome to this education discourse focusing on the state of the vulnerable children as a result of the outbreak of the coronavirus outbreak. And joining us this evening to discuss on that are Ms. Bukky Shonibare. She's the one I can see here now. Others as they join us later. The other panelist was here earlier, but he had to reset his computer. So perhaps he will join us later. So I'll continue with Ms. Shonibare for now. And when others join, I will introduce them. So Ms. Shonibare, you please greet everyone. Ms. Shonibare is the founder of Girl Child Africa, and she's also one of the co-conveners of Bring Back Our Girls, and in an initiative that's now been recognized globally for its advocacy against terrorism and the insecurity situation in the northeast region of Nigeria. So we shall be examining how some of the circumstances around the coronavirus outbreak has affected Nigerian children in various ways. It should be noted before we start that over 258 million children had been out of school before this pandemic. But with this pandemic, we now have 849 million more children that are now globally that are either at the risk of illiteracy or having some little partial learning activity due to the coronavirus. And according to UNESCO, 95% of children worldwide are affected by the school closure as a result of the pandemic. So I can see that the other panelists is about joining us now. So if you can hear me, please unmute your mic.
My mic is unmuted.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear you earlier. So we'll start. What do you think are the risks of the continuous closure of schools during this period?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Abdussalam. Thanks for having me on this program, on this discussion. I think that, with the introduction that you have given in terms of what the figure looks like, it's a clear indication of the fact that even before pandemic, right, there has been issues around children not going to school, out of school children, issues around the fact that we have even children that are going to school that do not have access to quality education. We've had all of these issues. We have issues around access. When you go to the northern region, particularly the northeast region and the northwest region, we've seen how issues around children not having close proximity to where a school is. And when we look at a lot of all of these issues, what the pandemic has done is to further exacerbate that particular problem, literally worsen it. So whatsoever that we see as the problems that are coming up in relation to children out of school, vulnerable children not going to school, were existing problems before the pandemic. What the pandemic has simply just done is to worsen the situation. If anything has become clear also in terms of what the effects are, is what really access is to children. So far, before the pandemic, we've talked about how children do not have access to physical school, such that they can, wake up in the morning and go to a particular school. Now we are talking about issues around access to e-learning, to technology, So that's why a lot of the children who are out of school, why that figure across the world, like Abdussalam had said earlier, why it is that large is because even though there are children going to school, not all of those children have access to the kind of technology that would be able to help them in situations like pandemic. And when we talk about vulnerable children, you know, we're talking about children that are out of school pre the pandemic. We're talking about internally displaced children. We're talking about the Almajiri children. We're talking about homeless children. We're talking about children from really poor and vulnerable families. So by the time we do a categorization of all of these children, of all of these vulnerable children, it helps us understand how what the pandemic has done is literally to just worsen existing situations. So in answering that question, I don't want to delve into other points that I have prepared for this meeting, but to answer that question directly in terms of what effect is for us to, and this is me summarizing it, for us to look at all of those problems that we had before. Access, quality, teaching, what people are learning, not having access to facilities, all of those things. Put them now within the context of, you know, this era of e-learning and technology learning, and you can draw direct correlation between what used to be pre-pandemic and now during pandemic. My worry is,
sorry,
if we are not proactive.
You still speak later on. So we have with us as well Mr. Mohammed Keana is a team lead of Almajiri Child Rights Initiative. I would like you to share with us your perspective on the subject of the risks of this school closure to children.
All right, thank you very much, Abdussalam, and good afternoon, everyone, for joining us on this conversation. Just like Bukky has highlighted on the topic, when it comes to the issue of education, the people I speak for, the Almajiri children, it's always very difficult to to begin to make any presentation as regards to education and what have you, because in the first place they are not in the class in any way. But of course, the impact of COVID-19 on education is something that experts across the world have highlighted. Is indeed going to be very devastating for education sector across the world. There are, over 40-something million children are out of school. They stop going to school. Back here in Nigeria, of course, also our schools are closed. But most importantly, the vulnerable groups of children that are struggling to even have access to this education in the first place. With this COVID-19, that lack of opportunity will just be widened, just like Bukky has highlighted. If you talk about the IDPs that are in the Northeast, I was just reading the education in emergency group report on the COVID-19, and I saw what their response strategies is in the midst of this COVID-19. And of course, they indeed highlighted the response strategy has to do with the issue of, first of all, preventing the spread of the virus among children, and of course, mitigating the impact of the stay at home on children. So the impact of the COVID on education across is something that is going to be very huge on the education sector. And for those who are struggling to have access to the education in the first place, it's just going to worsen it, So that would be my few comment on this one. Hello, Abdussalam.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I mistakenly muted my mic earlier. So coming back to Ms. Shonibare, so how do you think with the strategy that the government had set in place to respond to the COVID-19 virus within the education sector, how do you think, how effective have you seen it so far?
Thank you very much. In terms of effectiveness, to measure effectiveness, we need to first of all agree on what sort of metrics are we using to measure effectiveness. So we have to look at that within the context of the realities of the pandemic on one hand, and then also look at it within the context of expectations, and then begin to draw indicators from that to measure the extent of effectiveness. So let's look at examples of some of the things that has been done so far in other places. You see Lagos, for instance, coming up with, and Lagos was literally like the pioneer in putting together a lot of the strategies that I would say other states then started learning from, perhaps, or started improving on. That of first using technology. And technology here, sometimes we mistake technology to be phone, laptops, tabs, and all of that. But technology is like the bridge builder right now. So we have the education that we need to get to the people, and then we have the people on the other hand, but we need a means, between the people and what we need to get to them, and that is what technology is doing. And I was listening to the Commissioner for Education in Lagos State, and she was talking about how they had to resort to radio and TV. Radio because it is wider. They are not using tablets and all of that, even though they are e-learning, but because more children need to be reached, radio provides that particular opportunity. Okay. So we've seen things around radio, around TV, e-learning. My daughter, for instance, in her school, they have moved all of their classes on Zoom. So she does her schooling on Zoom. So we see all of what government and non-government organizations have been doing. But in terms of effectiveness, I would say that to an extent it has been effective. At least during the pandemic, children are not just sitting down. Some children are not just sitting down or going to school. Whether we are leaving some behind then becomes another conversation that we may want to have in terms of measuring effectiveness. Another metric that I would use to measure effectiveness is in terms of the relevance of what is being taught. Is it relevant to today's reality? Again, that brings us to the issue of our curriculum, and that's a big debate. But that's, like I said in my opening remarks, that problem of the relevance of what they are teaching is not a pandemic related problem. It is a problem that has been there. So, but again, we have to bring it in pandemic, So what are they teaching them? Is it relevant for them? My third metric would be relatability. To what extent can children that are being taught through this technological means relate to what is being taught? So if I'm teaching logarithms in mathematics, how can children understand the relationship between logarithms, algebra, and today's problems and solving today's problem? The fourth metric that I will use is the ease of understanding. So one of the things that help children learn is interactive, how interactive it is. But because we have now moved on radio and TV, children are just watching, taking notes. So you cannot really achieve relatability, in terms of interactivity. Let me put it that way. And then finally, I would use the metric of accessibility. How many children, how many Almajiri children, IDP children, poor children from vulnerable communities that do not even have lights or technology, even the transistor radio. Not every family has transistor radio. So in terms of how accessible it is, I would say that we are faring well, but majority of children are left out. So that would be my answer to the question of effectiveness.
Our third guest has just joined us. This is Chiamaka Chukwude. She is a program coordinator of Youth Child Support Initiative based in Enugu. So, Ms. Chukwude, can you hear me? I'm afraid I can't hear her voice at this end. So we'll just continue with the two of you. So, Mr. Keana, talking about the Northeast. Okay, welcome. So talking about the Northeast region. In the Northeast, before this pandemic, there had been some crises over there before now. So this pandemic is like a crisis upon a crisis. About 4.2 million children are there. and out of them, 400,000 are in IDP camps. Those IDP camps are even struggling to ensure that the children are able to learn. So this pandemic has brought upon an additional burden on them. So what do you think, what's the assessment of the situation in the Northeast as with regard to the children in the Northeast region of Nigeria?
Yeah,
Keana?
just like I highlight. Hello, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, continue.
You can hear me?
Yes,
okay,
yes,
just
yes.
like I highlighted in the opening remark and about the impact of this pandemic on education. And just like you have rightly said, those in the Northeast that have been affected by insurgency will have to are facing like a multiple impact right now with the current pandemic issue, and especially those who are in the IDP camps. They talk about access to education right now for them may not even necessarily be like a priority for them, you know, and or even possibilities, not even a possibility in a way, because we all know the condition of their living in those IDP camps, environment that they are not guaranteed of so many social amenities and basic amenities like electricity and all that. And many of them are already in a very distressed situation and condition. Many don't have the gadgets and learning facilities that other children outside the IDP camps have, such as like laptops, radios, and TV, you know, to be able to take part in the e-learnings that government have initiated or private organizations have initiated. So for those children within the Northeast, and especially those in the IDP centers, this period of COVID-19 crisis for them is a double blow for their own struggle to access education. Like I mentioned earlier on, the organizations working around providing education for IDPs are more focused on, one, preventing the spread of COVID-19 among these children, you know, that are in the IDP camp, because that's very important. And then secondly, they are also very interested in ensuring that their mental state and other, they are not exposed to other vulnerability during this issue of COVID-19. So the impact of the COVID on education, especially for those in IDP, cannot be overemphasized. Yeah, it's hitting them so hard.
Right.
And
so thank you very much. We'll move on to, please, if you are not one of the panelists, kindly mute your mic. I've been muting people since. Please do us a favor of muting your mic so that you won't be interfering in this conversation unnecessarily. Thank you. So we'll proceed now to, I don't know why Ms. Chukwude is still finding it difficult to join us. But whenever she joins us, we'll introduce her again. So we've talked about the radio programs. It should be noted that across Nigeria, there are 31 states. 31 of the 36 states and the federal capital have radio and or television programs. For some even have online programs. In the case of Yobe State, for example, Yobe is entirely online. I was surprised to even see that. But across all the states of the federation across Nigeria, including the FCT, we have 31 states that have one or another program for children at home in varying degrees. So I don't know whether either of us, whether Ms. Shonibare or Mr. Keana, have you ever followed any of these programs before? Ms. Shonibare first.
Okay, yes, I have. I've listened in on some of them. I've watched some of them on TV. I have two daughters, both in secondary school, and so I've literally watched them, follow some of these programs. So yes, I've listened in. And even beyond the ones that are being done in Nigeria, the one that is being done by DSTV as well, I have also followed it as well.
Okay. What's your assessment of it in regards to how they are carrying out their assessments and evaluating the students at the end of each lesson?
Okay, so for me, maybe I'm able to accept. Okay, so let me give you an example. I lecture at a university, at Pan Atlantic University. The moment the COVID-19 situation started, all lectures were moved online. And, the faculty, the lecturers were taken through, so that's Lagos Business School. Lagos Business School literally took all the lecturers through first a 2-day training on using Zoom to now deliver your lectures. The technicalities, how to go about it and all that. And it was even able to help me see a lot of features on Zoom that can be used, help me know how to interact with my students, most of whom are adults, older people, and all that. So when I relate that, maybe my head is thinking in the direction of the fact that I'm also a lecturer, right? And I look at, Lagos Business School, the things that they put in place. I'm careful not to compare them, right? So when I look at those ones that are being delivered on radio, on TV, which are the ones that I've had access to, and even online as well, I'm concerned about the extent to which we can achieve interactivity and the extent to which we can achieve effectiveness. So effectiveness, and all those other factors that I mentioned. But I must say that as much as I expect improvement, I am just happy that education did not stop because of a pandemic, that it has continued. As we go on, we will keep pushing out recommendations, ideas on how to improve it. So my assessment is there's still room for improvement.
Okay. And Mr. Keana, so you would recall that sometimes when the school closure was announced, about a week or two after it was announced, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management announced that it was going to carry out some school feeding program for children during this period. And we understand that across Nigeria, so many children, about 9 million plus children, I don't know the exact figure, but about 9 million children are said to be fed on a daily basis in some public schools. So I don't know whether what's your assessment of the implementation of this, if you are aware of it, the implementation of this feeding program during this period. Sorry, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Myself, you.
Okay, continue. Hello. It's Mr. Keana.
Okay, yeah.
Please
can you hear me now?
Start all over. We couldn't hear you earlier.
Okay. If I get you clearly, I couldn't hear you as well. But then I know you're asking question around school feeding program, right?
Yes. It's implementation during this period.
Okay. I know that the president during his second address to the nation and asked the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to ensure that the school feeding program continues during this lockdown. And I also had the minister explaining some of the modalities and framework to achieve that. Of course, I have not seen any pictures or videos showing that is happening right now. But I know that we had contact with someone from who is in charge of the school feeding program and at the presidency, and they kind of share the idea on how they're going to go about it, like sharing some tag to parents Okay, no, they will designate a collection center within the community where these children are, and then parents will be given some cards and for collecting of this food, and then they take it back home. So I think they are still developing the framework for implementation, or they have started, but I have not come across the implementation so far. Actually, I have not come across. Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Okay.
Please, I've not been following
Chukwude has
the
just joined us.
conversation.
Ms. Chiamaka Chukwude, rather.
Yes.
She's
yes,
the program coordinator of Youth Child Support Initiative, and a non-governmental organization based in Enugu.
Of course.
Ms. Chukwude, can you hear me? So, anyway,
yes, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, good. Welcome. So, please turn on your camera. I don't know. Anyway, let's continue like that. So, from your end, what's your general assessment of learning at home during this period?
Well, what is happening in this area is that the government is supporting a kind of learning through radio and television programs. They have online learning platform wherein students that join, they were asked to join in the online learning. So there is not much being done exactly because it is only the people that hear what government says in the radio, and most often, you know, these children, those of them that have television, they go through the whatever, that is Go TV, they watch films and all this. So they don't actually join in the online training and television and TV programs. It's only the adult that still listen to this. It doesn't affect our children in any form. That is helping them in learning at home. So it's only few parents who understands what it means to learn at home that have teachers, that is private teachers, to take care of their children. But for the vulnerable ones, and you know what it means for one to be vulnerable, they are all handicapped, no help at all. So if there is anything that can be done for them to be helped, because these are the area that we have serious issue. Now that in Nigeria, we are talking about 13.2 million children out of school, and these children are mostly vulnerable children. Now, if care is not taken and something is not done about the issue of education, now that we have this issue of COVID-19 pandemic that made people to stay at home, I think this might increase the number of children out of school, because when some of these children are not taken care of and they lose interest in education, they may stop entirely going to school. Maybe after COVID-19, they may join hands to other things and not really going to school. And then this will mop up the number of children out of school.
Thank you very much for that response. So from what you just said now, we might be having in our hands more children out of school after the pandemic because of the way it's being managed, the way the situation is being managed at the moment. So that takes us to the next question. Ms. Shonibare,
yeah,
what do you think could be done to improve the situation at hand now?
Let me lock the door too.
I mean, with regard to increasing access to education during this period and beyond.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so before we know what to do, we need to decide collectively as practitioners in this field, what is the goal, what do we want to achieve, and then articulating what the goal is then helps us come up with certain strategies. And for me, some of the things that I've penned down in terms of goals is generally we want to close educational inequalities gap. Secondly, we want to make sure that we leave no one behind. And you know, the leave no one behind phrase is usually used within the context of the SDG and SDGs. Let's not forget also that SDG Goal 4 is towards achieving quality education. Mm-hmm. And then the third, for me, in terms of goal, is the extent to which we are creative and innovative in making sure that as many children as possible, regardless of creed, of class, of location, that they also get educated. My fourth goal that I noted is the extent to which government is able to achieve its responsibility while serving as a strategic framework that NGOs and those of us who support in this field can plug into. So I think in moving forward, first, and that's now answering specifically your question. First is in moving forward, we need to have a strategic framework. And when we say strategic framework, sometimes it looks like a big word, especially when you go to the local communities. But what a framework does is to provide a strategic direction. Now we are in a pandemic. This era may stretch, whether we like it or not, even post-pandemic, many things will not remain the same. So in this situation, I think that particular strategy will help us define a lot of things. First, it will help us define what exactly is learning in a pandemic situation, right? We need to redefine learning. What we have always thought learning is really needs to be changed. And I think that's one of the things this pandemic is forcing us to do. The things that we thought that when we teach children, they will be successful, we have seen how they have not really been working. So we need to redefine learning. So we need to redefine, moving forward, technology, right? So we say that people are doing e-learning, but we do not define what technology is. Technology is not a tab. Technology is not www. Technology is not a lot of those things that we think technology is. For me, technology is a means of bridging gap. So how do we make sure that the children in Lagos State, in Victoria Island, have access to education as much as the children in Kaduna or in Mesendari or in Chibok or in all of those communities? So I think moving forward, we need to define technology within relative context, within the context of the realities of these vulnerable children. My third point would be that, we now really need to redefine what we are teaching. The skills that will be needed post-pandemic are a lot of new skills that we need to develop. So we need to prioritize, for instance, teaching children resilience, adaptability, ICT, communication. Businesses will now be closed via Zoom, via meetings. We no longer will travel as much as we travel, especially immediately post-pandemic. So you will have to do communication. You have to, sell your business online. Those are the things we need to begin to teach our children. How do you communicate when your body is not physically present in front of the person that is receiving the information, yet you are convincing enough? And my second to the last point will be, moving forward, we need to define a monitoring and evaluation system in place. And that ties into what the earlier panelists talked about, the woman from the Southeast. The fact that how do we measure that, yes, we have these plans in place, but how many children are accessing it? Are they learning? The effectiveness of that learning. So we need that monitoring and evaluation. And finally, I would say that we need some form of online edu marshals. In Lagos, they have the edu marshals where they go out and when they see street children, they pick them. How do we make sure that now that we are not in an era where children are wearing school uniforms and we can see children, walking on the street, not going to school since there are no schools, how do we monitor to be sure that parents are ensuring that their children are learning? And how do we incentivize that, to make sure that education continues? But most importantly, my final point is we must all take collective responsibility in making sure that children are educated. If you're in a community where children do not have access to radio, if you have radio, when that program is being done, put your small speaker. A lot of us have those Bluetooth speaker. There's a particular community where the person got a big speaker, plug in the education program so that all children can gather and they can begin to learn. So I think it is also something we can do to support vulnerable children at this time, so that we can make sure that even in pandemic situation, education continues and effective education can be delivered. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So, Ms. Chukwude, so regarding,
yes,
I don't know whether you have anything more to add to that, in ways in which we can make things better.
Well, what she says, she's right. In holistically looking at education, this time around, it's very, very necessary that you have framework, you have structure, you have this and that, and monitoring and whatever. But I think also we need to look at the immediate action. What can we do now that all these things, technology, television, because most of these people are in very remote area where electricity sometimes is not even available, accessible. Not to talk of using all this technology, because for you to use all this technology, you need at least electricity to work with. And for you to get these children have these things. I think there are other, at times we look out of the box in order to see that something is going on at least now. It's not as if that there are no need for all those structures being in place, monitoring and what have you. But what are the things, immediate things that we can do to get at least some of these children to have something accessible during this pandemic, so that as we go on, we now look at other areas. I think of having creating a hotspot learning around these communities where these vulnerable people are. Because we have been working in these communities and we know we have volunteers, and some of these volunteers are teachers. So if we can work with them, looking at all those things that we need to take care of, distancing, personal distancing, and then hygiene, promoting hygiene, telling them what and what not to do, trying to make sure that we have just few number of them as prescribed by the medical practitioner concerning this pandemic. I think we can do something at least to have them learn. Even if we can make use of this internet or whatever radio, let them be guided by these our volunteers and people that work in the community. There are so many education-focused NGOs that have been working with these children, vulnerable children, right inside the community. They can be made use of. If the government will think it very interesting to do, they can bring in those people and then make sure that something, at least something is going on within them to remind them that there is something like education. Knowing fully well that we don't know when this pandemic will come, so that we can have a plan, because as it is now, there is no plan for such making a framework or a structure that can carry those children along. I don't think we have it now at hand, because I know that in Nigeria, most often we don't plan things ahead. We plan within the problem, and I think that is what is happening now. So in my own point of view, I think that government should do something to let these children at least to be having a form of learning, no matter how small, using what we have at least around them. In these IDP camps, you know, I know that some of them are being carried along by some volunteers to give them one knowledge or the other, give them some knowledge for them to at least to be carried along. So these are the areas I'm looking at. Holistically, all what she's saying concerning having a plan, monitoring, and all these things is very, very important.
Madam, thank you very much for that.
You say what?
Thank you. So, Mr. Keana.
Yeah.
Talking about planning, as she just said now, we have a situation in the north, in the northern region, across the northern regions, where the government is just banning the Almajiri system. And we have the location of children and all sorts of things like that, as many of us are likely aware. So I would like to have your view on that action and how effective you think that action will be in the nearest future.
All right, thank you very much. And for us, advocates for the Almajiri Child Right to Education and Social Inclusion, I said at some point that one of the positivity of the COVID-19 has to do with hastening of our strategic plan on achieving equitable and non-discriminatory education for the Almajiri children. And one of, part of our strategic plan is how do we ensure that we have a framework, which you was talking about. I have always argued that achieving education for the Almajiri children is the most simplest thing to do if we have a framework that is sustainable and can be replicated and scalable. Sustainable in the sense that it can keep, it's not going to be, it won't stop after some time, and then the output and the outcomes of what you are teaching these children is measurable. So for us, the relocation of these Almajiri children to their original community has been our very long-term vision, because we believe that achieving education for them right now under this present structure of the traditional Almajiri system, where the children are scattered across and all that, you cannot be able to achieve a measurable, scalable intervention in it. And for us as advocate for the children, Almajiri children, we are very, very concerned and particular about non-equitable education and not just any form of education. So the relocating of these children in their community is very much in line with a framework that we are proposing for adoption across the northern, and that is community learning Almajiri school system that will allow these children to have their primary education as well as formal education system close to their own community, or at worst, the nearest constituency to their original parent. And this has to do with the issue of sustainability and responsibility on the part of the parents, the government, and the community. So in as much as this COVID-19 is causing a lot of bad situation around education and so many other things, for us who are working to ensure we close the gap between Almajiri access to education for Almajiri children, it provides for us an opportunity to develop and institutionalize and establish a community-driven framework that will allow these children to have both type of education that is measurable and quality and equitable. You know, so for this is my take on what is going on around the education of these children. But it's a good one for us, and I believe it will provide for us a very good framework to achieve equitable, quality, and non-discriminatory education for Almajiri children. So going post COVID-19, if we are able to achieve the class model that we are proposing, then we can in Nigeria, the number of out-of-school children that comes from Almajiri system of education will reduce that dramatically. Because I'm already so excited in trying to roll out this idea of class, that's community learning Almajiri school system, established in all the community where these children come from, and then they're able to access its education continuously post COVID-19. So for us, the COVID-19 provides both bad and good opportunity for Almajiri to have good education like every other children.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Keana. So, Ms. Chukwude.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I would just like you to add to this regarding, like, we have the Almajiri children in North. We have some children that are children of farmers and some such vulnerable children that are children of fishermen. We have such children in the South too. What do you think can be done to assist these ones? Or what have you seen being done to assist them during this period? You know, ordinarily they are not in the cities, they're always in villages or hinterlands.
Just like I said before, this period, the immediate action I think can be taken, because even though some of them, they are not residing in the sea continuously or in the farm, there are times that they come back to the town to go to school. But I think that this sit at home is an opportunity for them to go to the farm and stay, because this is a farming period, this is a fishing period. So they likely go there because most often they have houses inside those farms and seashores where they stay for the farming period and for the fishing period. So I think the most important thing to be done for them now is, now that they have left their main community homes to their farming areas and fishing areas, they can also be carried along by volunteers and people working in the CBOs in the communities can carry them along. Because some of these people I know, during school period, they come back to the village or to their community to go to school. But during holidays and then farming period, as it were now, they normally go to the farm. So if we are to reach them, we reach them right there in the farm, right there where they are fishing, and then at a free period. Because I know that if government makes it a priority, once you get there and bring them together, they can come and listen to you. So but to institutionalize what is happening there, I don't think it's easy here for us, because education is very important and they don't actually neglect it. So everyone here likes education, and whatever it takes for them to go to school, they do that. So, but the only problem we have is during that farming period, and they don't use school days for this farming period. I mean, to go to farm, I mean for the children, but they go to farm whenever there is opportunity, especially opportunity like this COVID-19 pandemic that set them at home. So they are there, they need to be reached there. So for them, they have organized society during a school period. They go to normal public school and they come back. So I don't think there is any special program to be made for them, since whenever there is education, the period of education is there for them, they come back. So it doesn't stop them from going to school at all.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for that. So, Ms. Shonibare, I'm going back to the Almajiri question again. I know that you are also a legal expert. So, what do you think is the legality of transferring the children from one state to another, irrespective of the COVID-19 pandemic?
What's the what? I didn't get
legality, that.
Legality.
Oh, legality of what?
Of the transferring of the children from one state to another.
Legal framework.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I just to clear any ambiguity, you are asking question of the legality of moving children from one state to the other because of the pandemic.
Not
Is that your
because
question?
Just irrespective of the pandemic, moving them, forcing them from one location to another.
Irrespective of the pandemic.
Irrespective of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you for using the word force. You know, and I think when you use the word force, it brings in the context of the children or the parents not granting the consent for those children to be moved from one point to the other. I think from the legal perspective, it is against the law, clearly. And let's look at it from two different perspectives. First, the perspective of the rights of the child. You know, we have international convention on the rights of the child, that's TRCN, which has been domesticated in Nigeria as the Child Rights Act. And when you look at the content of the Child Rights Act, it explains copiously the fact that children also have rights. So that the person is under 18 or is a child, and there's a government, you know, in terms of the unequal power relations, does not give the government the leeway to just pick the child from one point or the other. Children also have rights. So that's from the point of international convention. And then the point of human rights. When you look at it, and this is me just trying to, you know, be legal based on your question. Constitutionally, Chapter 4 of our Constitution guarantees human rights. And those human rights are not just the right of adults, they are rights of children as well. You know, so we must also look at the fact that children have the freedom, you know, to live in a certain place, associate in a certain place, move in a certain place, choose not to do certain things. So when children are illegally moved from one point or the other, it is a violation of international laws as well as our national law, especially our constitution and the Child Rights Act.
Okay.
Hello? I know that you
Hello?
would like to say something about that, Mr. Keana. Mr. Keana, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes.
Continue.
Okay. Oh yes, I do have. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, continue.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think the issue of relocating these children, whether irrespective of whether it's COVID-19 or not, just like Bukky has mentioned about the right of the children and all that, I think in the same convention on the right of the UN Convention on the Right of Children, I mean Article 5 or thereabout, clearly also states that the state has primary responsibility to take administrative, social, educative or education measures to protect children from abuse, danger, and exploitation, even while in care of their own parents. And if you look at the situation of the Almajiri children, we have seen this over the time that they have been exposed to abuse, exploitation in the hands of their malam, whether it is the parent that took them to the malam. And this is clearly against their own fundamental right as children. And government as a state has the primary responsibility to take every measures possible, okay, to protect these children from such exploitation and negligence, maltreatment, So, I mean, whether it is COVID or non-COVID, government for years, and that's what I've been saying, they have failed in their responsibility to protect the right of these children, to have access to education, to have childhood, to have nutrition, not to be exposed to devices that we see them on the street. So the issue of relocating these children by the government, I think is protecting the right of the children and not the other way around. I know that some of the fears and concerns people are making now has to do with the issue of COVID-19, having to transfer them from one place and other, and lack of proper protection measures for them. That is very, very understandable. But the action itself is in the best interest of the children as far as we are concerned, because like I mentioned, the state has the responsibility to take all measures to protect the children, and relocating them back to their parents and ensuring that they are still within their parents is the best interest of the children. As far as the Child Rights Act is also the Convention on the Right of Children is also confined.
Sorry, let me quickly say something. Yeah, okay. Mohammed is absolutely right. I think you should have given me a better context. I didn't know it was the context of exploitation.
Yes.
So I thought it was just, picking children from one place. And when you use the word force, it speaks to how so I didn't have all of that context of possible exploitation and everything that Mohammed laid as background in providing. So I absolutely agree with Mohammed, and I don't need to overflog that point.
Okay. For learning to take place, teachers are very essential part of that process. Ms. Chukwude, so I would like you to propose to us ways in which teachers can be assisted during this period to teach children better.
Okay, I think that teachers has a lot of work to do this period, but government need to support the teachers because they themselves, they need to stay at home in as much as everybody is staying at home. So if government should support teachers in different areas, provided they take cognizance of all those measures according to medical precision concerning this issue. So I think that teachers can help. And teachers also may have their own way, provide their own way through which they can reach their children. They can have an innovative ways of reaching out their children, at least to make sure they carry them along as far as this education, because they have their curriculum, they have everything it takes. They know what they're supposed to be doing in school by now. So if they can devise a means as individual teacher, as a school, through which they can reach out their children to make sure they have understanding of what is going on. Now, phone number is another thing, especially children in the township. I'm not talking about the vulnerable one in the village, though I've spoken about the issue of using volunteers, because we have been using volunteers seriously, and these volunteers do this work not because they are being paid. So if they can do also the work of volunteer in their respective communities for teachers living in the community. And I know that most organizations, they use teachers as volunteers working in the area of vulnerable children, because they know that they can easily reach the children. They know when the children is at school, because most of them are working in the same school where children are going. They know when the children are absent, they know what is happening to the children. So we as community workers, we normally use teachers as volunteers. So be it as it may, they can still do the same work now that this pandemic is on. They can have that little opportunity to gather children and then educate them according to their curriculum, because they know what they're supposed to be doing. So I think that is the way teachers can help this period.
Oh, thank you very much for that. So,
Abdussalam.
Hold on, please hold on. Among our guests this evening is a registrar and chief executive of the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria. I don't know where he is now. Mr. Keana, proceed.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to add.
You wanted to say something. You wanted to add something.
Yes. I just wanted to add to the point that was made earlier by Mrs. Chukwude.
Okay.
Again, just to add, not to counter it, just to say also that for teachers that have access to technology and internet, I know that Microsoft has been doing a lot of free online teacher training to some teachers. So just in case some of those teachers, I understand the peculiarities, but just in case some of them, I know that, for instance, Lagos is doing that, and they're able to join technologically, yes, and Ogun State. But again, I think for those of us that are in civil society and NGOs here, I think this is also part of what we can add to the work that we do to facilitate, that kind of training, for teachers, online, using Zoom, and if they need support with money for data to join, 1 day, 2 days training on how to use technology or how to adjust to teaching in this pandemic era. It's something that we can add. And let's also not forget parents as well. Most of the teaching that is being taught now, most of my child's class work and everything, we literally just sit down and do it together. So as much as teachers have that responsibility, this is also a good opportunity for us to bring parents on board as also educators, quote and unquote, because of the pandemic. So just to add that, thank you.
Okay.
So thank you. Moving forward, we've been able to establish how parents can assist the children, how the government can assist the children, and how the society could be of help to children affected as a result of the school closure during this pandemic. So the Teachers Registration Council Registrar and CEO has joined us back. Professor, if you can hear me, I would like you to address this house and comment on some of the things I've said so far. Proceed, sir. Prof. Ajiboye.
Hello.
Yes, sir. I was waiting your comment, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. First, let me just appreciate you for inviting me to the discussion. It's been a very stimulating one. Actually, looking at the vulnerable children and the impact of COVID-19 on their education, I think it's something that is really, really important. Because while the children of the rich and the well-to-do can be adequately taken care of using so many other means, especially those of them who are in private schools, they have so many opportunities to be involved in for their education to continue even within this period. But the children of the vulnerable are not so lucky, and I'm very glad we have been able to isolate them. Children of the farmers, the fishermen, the alimajiri children, you know, we have been able to identify the marginalized. What we can, I think this is very important, and I believe very strongly we are all affected. You know, if we are not all infected, we are all affected by this COVID-19. That is the reality. And like I said, the landscape of the education system in Nigeria will have to change after this COVID-19. Definitely. We now know that the face-to-face classroom thing cannot work, cannot continue to work for us. That we have to use technology, leverage on technology. I normally say it, that technology will not replace teachers, okay? But teachers who know how to use technology will probably replace those who do not know how to use technology. So we have to, after this COVID-19, we have to leverage more on technology. And this is the reality, because the rest of the world will not wait for us. The rest of the world will not wait for us. And I believe very strongly the government, even at the federal level and all the state governments, they will begin to think of what they can do to make sure that we, you know, at the level of Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria, we are going to make sure that we increase our tempo of digital literacy training for Nigerian teachers. And we have submitted even a proposal to the Federal Ministry of Education on expanding, or what we call upscaling, the scope of the digital literacy training for the teachers. We believe very strongly that this is the way to go, and that's where we are going to go by the grace of God.
Thank you very much, sir, brother. Ms. Shonibare.
Yeah, I really appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Ms. Shonibare, give us your closing remarks in less than 1 minute, please.
Less than 1 minute. Okay. I will just quickly say that this pandemic, as bad as it is an opportunity. So as much as we look at it from, I mean, personally, individually, we can assess what the opportunity is. For me personally, it has been an opportunity for a lot of time to spend with my children, a lot of time to exercise, a lot of time to read, you know, and all of that. Personally, but we must also, in the context of education of vulnerable children, look at how the pandemic provides an opportunity to re-strategize on long and meaningful collaborations. This is the time for public schools and private schools to begin to work together. We are all training our children, you know, so that when we get to heaven, God will not separate the children of the rich and the children of the poor. So I think that collaboration, this is the time for it to happen. And then we must also, secondly, improve on e-learning facilities and interactive technology. And thirdly, is for us to, this is an opportunity for us to strengthen, you know, the existing structures that we have that has been working, while doing away with the ones that are not working. It is also the time for us, like I saw in one of the comments, it is the time for us to make sure that teachers are adequately trained, you know, and I like the comment that was made earlier in terms of training teachers in technology. It is also an opportunity for us to redefine learning, and it is an opportunity finally for us to make sure that parents are involved in educating their children while making sure that teachers improve on the learning that they have been providing before now. Thank you.
Use more than 1 minute. Anyway, we have 1 minute to end this conversation, and we'll continue, God willing, again in the week. On Wednesday, God willing, we'll have another conversation around online learning. On Wednesday, you'll be receiving, before Wednesday, you'll be receiving an invitation to attend that one too. be having a conversation on Wednesday about the implementation of online learning in schools, especially as we're focusing on at least on the tertiary education level for that program. So, God willing, we look forward to meeting you there. Thank you very much for participating in this conversation. Bye.
Goodbye.